Now that we've covered that part of it, we will turn to something you mentioned many times, critically important, the marketing of a campaign itself. And for that, we will turn to Shane Liddell. Shane is considered the Gordon Ramsay of crowdfunding, not only because he truly knows his stuff, but because he's a straight shooter who will tell you straight. He may not hold back when it comes to telling you straight, and his brutal honesty may shock you a few times, but just like Gordon Ramsay, this brutal honesty comes from a place of intense passion for the subject matter. Many people refer to him as the only real expert in the crowdfunding world, but shh, don't ever say that to his face. He hates the word expert because he believes there's always more to learn. Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into crowdfunding?
Sure. Before I start, I just want everybody to know that I had a bit of a fight with a pizza last night and I lost. One of my crowns came off at the front of my mouth here. So don't get the idea that I'm a toothless wonder or wonder, because I'm not. Anyway, it couldn't have happened at the worst time. Right, let's talk about who I am. I got involved in crowdfunding back in 2012 purely by default. I was running a campaign for a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa. During the process, a marketing agency knocked on the door and said, "Here, we can help you." I dropped the money on the table. 5 days later, I sent them packing and asked for a refund, which they gladly gave me. But that's when the light bulb moment happened, where I saw there was an opportunity, more or less, that I could do better than they were offering. And that's how smart crowdfunding began. Since that time in 2012, especially initially, we were offering very low-cost services at around about $85 a package. That was priced as the market was at the time. We were doing reward-based crowdfunding, and we grew through a period of 27, 30 concurrent campaigns that we were helping, purely because of the pricing was so low and the demand for crowdfunding was really rocketing at that point. And I spent 6 years in the reward-based crowdfunding, and I say this to people, I say this to my clients. I was doing my apprenticeship, really. I was understanding platforms, the Indiegogo, the Kickstarter, how they worked, how their algorithms worked, what made one campaign perform better than another when it came to exposure on the platform. And of course, each month I had 27, 30 campaigns to test with and experiment with and eventually fine-tune and understand the platforms themselves, what it took to get the platform to get these offers funded. So that's who I am. I pivoted into equity crowdfunding at the beginning of 2018. And the rest history, really, from the point of view that equity crowdfunding is a little different to reward-based crowdfunding. You're going out there, you're trying to find backers, investors, through targeting and through some marketing. I don't like to use the word trickery because it's all ethical, but we use a lot of methods today. Personally, I've been involved in sales since 1994. I've seen how the sales process has changed today with technology being involved, and that's what we offer to our clients, what I would call leading edge marketing technology methods and techniques.
Okay, when it comes to clients or potential clients that come to you, what is the #1 advice you usually give them?
Oh, well, it's not about #1 advice. It's, you know, top of my head, I'll probably say allow enough time. Too many people come to me. In fact, this morning I had a guy, we had a call scheduled for Friday, which was canceled. He's going live on Monday. You know, I don't like to go into deals as a rescue. We're not magicians, as I've said many times. and we need time to prepare. So my number one piece of advice is allow enough time. Preparation is key, and that leads me on to probably what you're going to ask me next. What is the process when it comes to marketing? Well, the very first thing we begin with is what's called pre-launch. Now, pre-launch, I like to call it preparation because it is preparation. What do we do during pre-launch? Primarily, we're building a marketing stack. Now, the stack involves various components, landing pages, squeeze pages, whatever we decide to use for that specific client. And what are we doing during pre-launch? As I said, building the marketing stack. And the objective is to build a community of investors for the client. Investors built around a project through pre-launch are far more likely to invest in a project, because the pre-launch period takes them on what I call a journey, an investor journey, and during that period you are educating the investors about the client, about, in many cases, an individual within the issue or company, normally the CEO, sometimes not. So we do a lot of personal branding during that period too. And the objective is on testing the marketing assets that we've built for that project. Testing and optimization, of course, that's very critical to success for a live offer. Everybody goes on about emails and building your community. Yes, it's very important but you know, when it comes to equity crowdfunding, it's not like the numbers we see in reward-based crowdfunding. Reg CF probably is similar to reward-based crowdfunding in many aspects, but we're building a community of investors, in most cases, probably 600. But you know, these are high-ticket people. They drop 25 grand on the table, 100 grand on the table. With traditional crowdfunding, as we know, you're looking for $50 backers, similar to Reg CF, where you're looking for people to impulse invest with $100 or $300 or whatever it is at that time. In our case, Smart Crowdfunding, we don't build a single community, which I refer to as a tribe actually, for an issuer. We build two communities. The second community is something I refer to as our secret sauce. We leverage that second community to better the exposure throughout the process. But pre-launch is primarily building ads, building copy, using various images, split testing, and looking at the data. Now, I mention this to clients or potential clients I speak to. The data is important to make the right decisions, and we need a minimum of 21 days worth of data during pre-launch to make smart decisions. No pun intended there with smart crowdfunding, of course. But if I was to get one message across to people today, when it comes to going the crowdfunding route, is allow the time to build a stack. Of course, you have to build the right stack, prepare, create the assets, and test and optimize. You don't want to be going with a live offer, calling a Facebook ads guy and saying, can you run us some ads? It doesn't work. We know from 8 years of doing this that it doesn't work. And we know from 8 years of doing this what works. So that is really pre-launch. Pam, I'll hand it back to you to prompt me for the next thing. Sometimes I forget which direction we're going.
What is the typical budget for marketing?
Typical budget for marketing really depends on the flavor of crowdfunding, the crowdfunding model. We go Reg CF. Look, we all know it's more expensive as a cost of raise than a Reg D, purely because you're targeting retail investors. It's more expensive to do so, and you know, at the same time, if you look at Reg D, we have a tight-knit community of accredited investors to tap into. Your targeting is not shotgun marketing as it would be for targeting retail investors. It's more rifle approach marketing where we're very specific in the messaging we send out. Just repeat your question, please. I got a bit lost.
The typical market for budgeting. What?
Oh yeah, the budgeting side. Look, if you're going the Reg CF route, expect to pay total costs of 10% of raise. Out of that, that should cover your legal. Your marketing is sitting at about 60 to 65,000. That's to raise the max of $1,070,000. You go a Reg D. This is how we thumbsuck the figures because we need information from the client. Do you have any subscribers, for example? Because that is valuable. As somebody that comes to us with a blank slate, we have to do a lot more work to prepare them, and in most cases take a bit more time. Pre-launch, by the way, normally 30 to 45 days is about average. The cost for Reg D, we build a marketing stack, that's about a 25K cost, and then we use as I mentioned, it's more a thumbsuck depending on what the client has, $10,000 per million. Now they want to raise $10 million through Reg D 506C, then we're looking at a total cost of about 80K for marketing, thereabouts. With Reg A Plus, the most expensive of all, and I think the bulk of that cost comes from regulation-driven rules and so on, and you have to be approved, and you have to have audited financials and all that malarkey. But the marketing cost, as I mentioned with Reg CF, you know, you want to spend 10% to raise $1 million. With Reg A Plus, yes, it's slightly a lower percentage, but you're probably looking at marketing cost of around about 6%, 6 to 7% of raise. It runs into the hundreds of thousands of dollars if you want to raise a max of 50 million or so. But if you side by side two offers, a Reg D and you put alongside a Reg A for the same amount of money, Reg D is far cheaper. And I personally think far easier to fund. Look, crowdfunding campaigns, Erwin mentioned earlier, should all succeed. The only thing I will say about that is, and Erwin touched on this, the structure of the offer is really important. And in many cases, that's a strategic structure. Because when the offer is structured in an attractive way for investors by somebody who knows how to structure a deal that way, of course, it makes the marketing job a lot easier. So I think I've covered the cost. Fire away with the next question, Pam.
What would you consider the deadliest mistake a crowdfunder could make when it comes to...
Oh, this is Florida. We got big storms here. The deadliest mistake they can make is assuming that a platform is going to get them funded. Now, I say that fairly loosely. Look, there are some platforms, not many, that I believe have almost got it right. Many haven't. And many try to package marketing, especially marketing, into a pricing structure and say, oh, there we go, pay us that and we'll do everything. And I want to go back to the Indiegogo scenario. Indiegogo have attempted to do exactly that, right? And Indiegogo said, come to us, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the marketing. But I'm going to say to you today, 87% of campaigns fail on Indiegogo. So they haven't got it right. They've got some things right. So the deadliest mistake you can make is an assumption that put your money on the table and the platform will get you funded. Why I say that, the phone rings often, and you're witness to this, Pam, where people are coming to me after a week live on a platform and saying, oops, we made a big mistake. We need help. 90%, 99% of them I turn away because it leaves a bad taste if we then try to fix the problem and fail there's only one direction they would point the finger, and I know this from experience, so we try to avoid it. The only way I help people who have a live offer is tell them, right, stop everything, let's start in the beginning, let's do a 30-day pre-launch. Obviously, they have to have enough time left with their campaign, and we do the pre-launch, and then we run with the marketing effort and so on.
If somebody comes to you, but they don't want to spend the full amount of pre-launch, is there any way they can speed it up?
Yes, the only way you can speed it up is spend more money. It's time and money. Look, I've had people who've crowdfunded that have spent 2 years going through pre-launch. They didn't have budgets. But you know what? They came to me and said, wow, Shane, we spent 2 years, and it was almost 2 years, and we got 30,000 in our subscriber base. That is very valuable. It's great to leverage off that. However, you get others that have more money than sense in some ways, and they want to launch in a week. That's impossible. We specifically say a minimum 30 days for good reason. And in most cases, I stick with that irrespective of how much money they have.
What if they don't have budget for marketing? What advice would you give them?
Well, my advice is if you don't have budget for marketing, don't even bother with your campaign. My advice is to go out and find the money to fund your raise, whether that's to pay for your legal stuff, but primarily marketing is key to success. I don't think I'm teaching people anything new here. You know, campaigns need to be marketed just like websites need to be marketed. Websites you can build, and we all know this, and I'm sure many people in the audience have built websites. You build it, nothing happens, period. You have to spend dollars, or you have to spend time organically driving traffic to your website or to your offer or whatever it is.
Basically, crowdfunding isn't a build it and they will come philosophy.
Yes.
What advice would you give to any crowdfunder approaching you right now? What would be the best advice you could give them?
As I mentioned earlier, you know, allow enough time and make sure you have enough dollars. And also, you know, this is something everybody can do pre-crowdfunding, is do some form of validation. Crowdfunding actually, if you look at reward-based crowdfunding, very much so a validation tool. You can validate offers by putting together a very small marketing campaign and doing a few tests and seeing what the response is, collecting enough data, of course, and then making some smart decisions, as I mentioned earlier on.
What would you consider, I asked Erwin the time frame for him to do, what would you consider a legitimate time frame from day one they engage you up until the completed campaign? What kind of time frame?
Okay, pre-launch, as I mentioned, 30 to 45 days, sometimes longer. It depends on how much money we're actually trying to raise for the client. But, you know, live offer, and this is something I think people, some people on this call will benefit from, especially those in the platform business. Look, there is a reason why platforms like Indiegogo and Kickstarter only allow offers to run for 60 days. I've seen offers looking around at various platforms. I saw one the other day. It launched in August. It's closing in August 2021. Now that's ridiculous. From the point of view, there's no sense of urgency for the investors that you're spending dollars on to drive to a campaign to part with their money. You know, the sense of urgency is known throughout marketing. That's why we see websites selling their wares saying limited time, and they have a countdown timer. They want people to act there and then. Platform operators especially today, and people going crowdfunding, don't run your offers for 150 days, don't run your offers for 120 days, and I would suggest you don't run offers for 90 days. If you're going to get funded, you should get funded within the 30 to 60 day period. Indiegogo, Kickstarter spent a lot of money and they have a lot of data. and like I said in the beginning of this section, they have campaigns going live for a maximum 60 days for good reason, because it works. If you spend dollars driving investors to a platform and I'll come back next year, another investment's going to be presented in front of them, and you've lost not only the investment, you've wasted your spend on getting it in front of them.
So a different type of question: what makes you so passionate about crowdfunding?
Well, I get excited, you know. I mean, it's you in particular. You've seen how I am. I take on campaigns that actually become my own. You know, I'm a very serious guy. That is why I come across as a straight shooter. I don't take any nonsense. And you know, people who make stupid decisions, and we have many. That we've seen over the years drive me crazy. And I believe the best form of communication is down the line straight. If you wander here and wander there, there's always the chance they don't get the message you're trying to get across. If you're blunt, which I am sometimes, they get the message very quickly, and that benefits them. So my passion comes from my love of the industry. I love the industry I'm in, but I love helping people to raise money the right way. And the right way, unfortunately for many of them, is my way. And why do I say that? Purely because my way is the right way to do it. Look, there's other marketers out there. Our competitive edge is in using a different marketing stack to most. And when I say most, I'm probably talking 95%. I spent a period deep diving into marketing technology, methods, new tools. It changes today just like technology changes anyway. You know, it's a 6-month period, there's something new. I have access to some of the latest techniques through my connections. And that's what I offer to my clients.
Very good. So, any other advice you would like to give to crowdfunders in the terms of marketing?
Yes, I just want to run through. We mentioned pre-launch, and I'd like to just sort of finish off that part. I just want to say there's no template to success for crowdfunding campaigns. Each campaign is dynamic. When you press the launch button, things happen differently with your campaign than they do with others. And what is important is being able to pivot and move with these things that we see. Now, not everybody sees them. And in fact, clients don't necessarily see them, but those that are able to see what's going on have the best results. But going through the process, look, one of the most difficult things with crowdfunding is keeping the momentum going. Now, if you've planned it out correctly and done your preparation, in fact, just stepping back a bit, if you look at data from successful campaigns, you will see a spike on day 1, 2, successful campaigns, and then you'll see a lag, and that happens across the board, and it will lag. Let's assume we have a 60-day campaign. You'll see the chart do this, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then it stays like this, and it continues like this, and then on the final few days, probably 5 days, it ticks back up, and that's purely because people are trying to get in before it's too late. The biggest problem is the middle part. Now, the middle part is really about when you bring an investor into your database, the most important part is to tag them. Right? When you tag them and you're taking them on a journey, getting ready to go live, a lot of them have gone through what we call a unique process, in that we are removing objections, we're educating them, and we're warming them up so they're ready. Right, are you launching today? I need to do it today. That's the ideal scenario. But of course, when you go live, you will get a rush of investment, all being well, and then it'll taper off, as I said. The trick really is in tagging these investors so you understand and can segment them into they've invested and they haven't invested. And then you can communicate to those that haven't invested with unique communications for that specific audience. Right, it's a little bit more involved in that, but keeping the momentum going means retargeting, tagging and targeting non-investors to warm them up a bit more. Some of them go cold, some of them might have an objection, and of course that might lead to a telephone call with the founder to remove that objection. It is a sales process, but I'm going to say this: crowdfunding or selling today is far different from what it was in 1994 when I started. 94, I banged the phone and I wanted an appointment. I wanted to close them there and then. I went to the appointment, it's can I have the order? And those that asked that question generally would get the order because the others were too scared to ask it. Today it's different. Today, if you try to do that with people today, we know from data it's not effective. You have to take them on a journey. That is what keeps campaigns going. What we do different also, if I say what should a client do or a potential crowdfunder do different, it's really about being able to stay the distance. I've had people run campaigns and they are exhausted because it's a very hands-on raise. You know, we also get some customers that think, oh, they sit back and watch the money roll in. That's not our function. Our function is to prepare, bring the investors, but everybody has to have their hands on deck for that period of the live raise. After all, the money that they're raising is really the most important for their business, because without it, they can't roll out their plans, they can't expand, they can't grow to the next stage or to the next round, and so on and so forth. One thing I want to mention though, now I'm just moving on to post-campaign, I think it's really important, and many don't do this. They'll raise the money and it's, oh, we got our bucks, now we're spending it, and they're busy. That's all good and well. They forget about those that have invested. It's really important to nurture these people, to look after these people, and to those who haven't invested in your offer, because 9 times out of 10, once a company raises, let's assume a Reg CF amount, they're going to have another funding round down the line. So it's really important to keep in contact with your non-investors every 2 weeks. Why do I say every 2 weeks? A lot of people used to say a few years ago, every 90 days. That's old school. Today, there's so much clutter around. You need to have a 2-week cycle where you're reaching out to these people. It can be automated, of course, whereby you're dripping out information, maybe keeping them updated on your progress since the raise, and so on and so forth. I've said my part now. I don't know if we have any questions, Pam.
We have had a few pop up, and we will go to the first one. Either Shane or Erwin, you can answer. How do investors in crowdfunding get liquidity?
Erwin.
The only place to get liquidity is in the Reg A market. It's registered securities. They're registered with the SEC, and they can list on the NASDAQ if they want, if they qualify, and there can be an open secondary market. To this point in time, that market does not really exist. In almost every case, then there are 1 or 2 exceptions only. In spite of this huge bull market we're having, these issues are trading less today than their offering price. And that's something that will be corrected. I speak with people who are working to build that secondary market. I don't think they understand the amount of money that will have to go into it. But right now, if you invest in a Reg A offering and hold it for 30 days and then want to sell it, you're likely to sell it at a loss. And that's holding that industry back. The Reg CFs, the small ones, you buy it, you own it. You are very limited. You can give it away. If you need it because you need cancer treatments, you can sell it if you can find somebody to buy it, but there is no marketplace or no exchange that handles it. The Reg D market has never been liquid. As I say, it's $2 trillion of sophisticated money a year. If you're looking for liquidity, don't go there as an investor. But there, like I say, there's trillions of dollars of investment who appreciate yield over liquidity. If you buy into an apartment building, eventually it may turn over. Eventually it may get refinanced as the mortgage gets paid down. There are ways to build liquidity into a transaction by selling whatever it is you syndicated down the road. But the marketplace, the Reg D marketplace itself, does not contemplate liquidity. And in most cases, investors are required to sign that they have been told that there is no liquidity, and they may have to hold on to it for quite some period of time. There's a myth out there that you need liquidity in this market, and clearly you do not. Okay, there's plenty of investors who are very happy to get a check every quarter for decades perhaps, okay, and not worry about getting their money back. It hasn't been lost, but it's not going to come back to them at any real scheduled time. Liquidity, it's an interesting concept because there's been so much written about it in the last couple of years. And if you're an investor and you want to invest in a pool of real estate, there are a dozen, 50 REITs that trade on the New York Stock Exchange. There's no shortage of product. So you're not likely to see liquidity here at any point in the foreseeable future.
Okay, Erwin, this question would be for you. What stage of startups can benefit from Reg D instead of venture capital?
That's a good question, because venture capital is another one of those interesting myths. I originally came to San Francisco in the mid-'80s to work for a VC firm. That was, Silicon Valley in the mid-'80s was an interesting place. And they didn't have large buildings, and there were companies whose names you would know still in the garage. A startup can raise money. It's more difficult because you're not promising instant gratification in terms of a quarterly check. But not every company gets funded is in that space. I'm working on a funding right now for a pharmaceutical company. They're funding 2 stage 2 drug trials. If either one of the trials turns into a stage 3 and then a profitable, marketable drug, they're counting on returns in the billions over the course of the life of the patent. And we're thinking about funding those with revenue sharing because the company's balance sheet is negative. They're a startup in the sense that they've not sold the product yet. It's startups because they're not relying on return on investment, I would think need a little bit better story. Venture capitalists, in a good year, they fund 1,500 businesses around the country. And most of those are in certain designated industries. I had a client in Columbus, Ohio, who flew out here 3 times to meet with VCs, once or twice to New York. He attended a conference in Miami and then another where he got on stage and did a pitch in front of 50 VCs. When it was all said and done, flights, meals, time was $8,000–9,000. And, he could have raised enough money on Reg CF to do a Reg D and get it done. Venture capital is the Hollywood side of finance. I mean, I've known many. I worked for some. It ain't the 80s anymore, and the chances of actually being funded by a VC on their terms versus, and when, if ever it happens, with crowdfunding, you control the terms, you control the timing. So it's going to cost you a lot less in terms of equity or what the VC is going to buy for the money it's going to wave under your nose. I haven't closed a VC funding in a couple of years now, and I've looked at a couple, and clients when they really get through the paperwork and they understand how much of it is ego as opposed to reality, VCs don't pick the best companies. They pick the best stories. They have weird. I'm trying how to say this delicately, but there's no. Well, back in the 80s, the VC industry in the Valley and in New York, much like the banking industry, Wall Street, the advertising industry, restaurants. I mean, it was cocaine everywhere. They funded some of the companies that you rely on, and they hadn't slept in 5 days. So finance is fun. I mean, I've been around long enough to have had some of the good times.
Yeah.
But VCs are not a logical road for a startup that's serious about making a business out of what they're doing.
Okay. Next question. Do crowdfunding startups require audited financials? And if so, how much should be budgeted?
Reg CF does over 500,000, and I think there's a pandemic emergency that they reduced
250.
that. I think down to 350,000. For less than that, you need a non-audited financial presentation, which doesn't cost that much. An audit depends on how big is your business. The auditor is going to need 3 weeks to come in and look at your paperwork, or is it a question of just taking what's in the shoebox and putting it on a ledger? So I'm the wrong person to ask about what accountants charge. It's not an arm and a leg usually, but I also get referrals from PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte, and they tend to deal with clients who are a little bit bigger, and they charge a little bit more than some other auditors do. So it's really something, if you're going to budget, you're going to budget several $1,000s, depending on how much work there is. In the Reg D market, there is no requirement for an audit. There's nothing wrong with giving investors an audit, but a financial presentation, an unaudited, truthful representation of your balance sheet and income statement is appropriate. And what investors look for are the financial projections. If they give you money, what are you going to do with that money, and how much more money are you going to make with it? That's a key issue in crowdfunding and all investments. So that's something that may take longer or shorter. Sometimes the founders, got an accounting background and they do it over a weekend. And sometimes I've been presented with financial spreadsheets where they gave me version 106. So the modeling and the projections and the financial statements vary in cost. If you're looking on the cheap, there are several accounting firms in the CF market that get referrals from the platforms, from the portals, and are happy to keep their price down to be a favored vendor.
Okay, moving on. We have two related questions. One is, can a Kenyan startup use equity crowdfunding? And the other is, can a UK company raise money in the US?
Not under Reg CF. Those are limited to the United States. In the Reg D market, there's a substantial portion of that market from companies outside the U.S. Always. Money is typically a little cheaper here. Well, that's not fair. In some decades, money was cheaper here. I'm affiliated with a platform called Equitize USA, which is specializing in funding companies outside the U.S. and presenting them to U.S. investors. I did an office building in Cartagena, Colombia a year ago, which they marketed to Colombian expatriates in the United States. And one of the investors called up and told him he remembered walking past the building when he was a young man, and now he's in the U.S., and he was happy to invest in it. So yes, UK, Africa, South America, I've discovered there's a very good tech enclave in Montevideo, Uruguay. I've had several conversations with people there who seem to be knowing what they're doing. And there's lots of U.S. investors who appreciate if they invest in a company there, that company is going to be on a different pay scale than the U.S., and they're going to get a lot more bang for their buck. They're going to get employees who are working for a lot less. And that's a big piece of the globalization that is kind of written into the Jobs Act and nobody thought about.
Well, thank you, Erwin.
That help?
Yep, that helps. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined us today, and thank Mr. Shane Liddell and Erwin for all of the wonderful information. If we didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to either of these gentlemen, and they will do their best to answer it for you. We hope you found it informative. Thank you.
Okay, can I just, as a final closing statement, I want everybody who's going to, or considering going crowdfunding to think of this. Investors want returns, period. And this goes against sell the sizzle. I'm going to say this: sell the steak, not the sauce. Okay. And if you take that on board, I think you'll understand. We have a lot of offers out there. They're selling the sauce, the product, we got this fantastic gadget, but they're not selling the investment. The investment is secondary. If you look at what they're doing out there and how they're presenting these offers, they're doing it the other way around. I would always advise people, when you're spending marketing dollars to drive people to an offer, they're not going there to see your fancy gadget. They're going there specifically to, their objective is to get the information they want quickly. And when I say that, they need the investment financial information first and foremost. In many cases, investors, they're smart people, the rest fluff. Although we do get investors that invest into social good type campaigns, which is all good and well. But majority of investors are interested in one thing: I'm putting my money on the table. When do I get it back? And how much do I get back on top of my principal investment? Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to Victoria Silchenko. She's written a book called, let me just get the exact, Raise and Rise. She's just published it on Amazon, I think a week ago or so. It's called Raise and Rise, Funding Sources for Your Startup in the Era of Digital. Very valuable information. She spent 2 years putting it together. She's a very smart finance lady too, like Mr. Stein here, except he has a bit more experience. We won't go into that right now as to why. And well worth the read, because if you're still going to go the equity route to raise capital, there's some gems of information in there that you're going to find really useful. I'd like to thank everybody too. Thank you, Erwin, for your time. It's been great. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Pam. And thank you to everybody for attending. Have a great
My
Thursday.
pleasure. Thank you.
All right, bye. Bye for now. Cheers, guys.